Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm here with my dear friend Diana De Cabarrus, and today we're going to talk about uh, songwriting. Specifically, we're going to talk about writing lyrics and sort of writing music to lyrics versus writing lyrics to music. So I thought I'd bring in the most expert person I know on this topic to help you all. Welcome, Deanna. I think you are muted.
Hi. Hello.
All right. Hello.
Great to be
Hello.
here.
Hello.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about this stuff.
Very good. Yeah. So, Deanna, today I want to explore with you the difference in approaches between writing music to lyrics and writing lyrics to music, sort of which comes first, or how to approach one style of writing versus another. So certainly there are key differences in what you do as a songwriter with each approach. So wanted to ask for your insights on each, and maybe you can start out with sort of a simple summary of those differences and approach, so our viewers here have an overview, and then maybe go into a bit of detail on each one. And before you do that, just to let everybody know in the chat who's here with us on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching us from, if you have questions about today's topic, feel free to ask in the chat. We'll try to get to as many questions as we can towards the end, but if you ask them now, that would be better. And also let us know where you're from. We see that some people are, we have Germany, Missouri, another German, Connecticut, India, Florida, Seattle. Let us know where you're from. If you have any questions, let us know. All right, Deanna, what you got for us?
So, lyrics would also be really interesting while you're writing in the chat. If you want to write whether you have started any songs, words and lyrics first versus any songs, music first, whether you've got any habits with that already, that would be interesting to know. So basically, with music, it's not that music is easier at all, and it's not that composing music is less complex at all, but you've got, hundreds of thousands of words in each language. So you've got a lot of component parts with language. And if you're using a certain scale in music, you're going to have 5 or 7 notes. So that there's different numbers of raw materials. That's one big difference. Another big difference is how we receive music versus how we receive words. So if somebody speaks to you, if you're in a shop, if you're having any kind of conversation, you are undertaking a certain amount of mental effort to understand what's being said. So those of you that speak more than one language will be able to relate to this pretty easily. So at the moment I'm in Spain. I speak pretty decent Spanish, but I still have to there's an extra bit of concentration when I'm kind of going to buy the eggs and things like this. So our brain has to decode language, and this is in a way why people can have disagreements and breakdowns in communication, is because they've decided something means something.
Deanna, you are frozen for me. I'm not sure if you are frozen for others. Let us know in the chat, people. Okay, Deanna, now I see you. Now I hear you. There was a little audio crackling.
Okay.
Yes.
Don't crackle, internet. Be cool. Okay. So hopefully you can hear me. So yes, I was essentially saying that with words, there's a certain amount of mental processing that has to happen, even in sentences that are very, very common or that we know very well, or in our first language. And we have to decide what language means. Whereas we don't decide whether music is upbeat or downbeat or bright or dark. We just experience it that way. So that's another difference. And what that means, one of the things that means is that if there is a contradiction between the emotional register of the language, or what the listener is likely to make out of the language, and the emotional register of the music is always going to win. It's always going to be more powerful. So what we want to accomplish, whether we start with our lyrics first or with our music first, is to have a balance, to have them sounding like a natural fit, and also to have the listener be able to understand the most important words in the lyric. So, if you think about the song "Blowing in the Wind" by Bob Dylan, how many roads must a man travel down before we can call him a man? And if we all decided what it is that you thought that song means, we would probably all give it a different meaning. It's somewhat ambiguous in terms of the meaning of the song, but it's very clear what the actual words are. It's not that we're confused about what the lyric in that song is. It's not that we, I don't know when the last time I heard that song was, but I know it's how many roads must a man walk down before we can call him a man. So the actual lyric is very, very clear. The meaning of the lyric is very, very clear. So we want to strive for clarity in what we're communicating. And that's a different thing for whether there's any artistic ambiguity, which can be something we might want. That might be desirable, but we don't want any confusion. Lack of clarity is going to be a flaw in our song. So when whether we're starting from the lyric point of view or the music point of view, we are aiming to have a nice fit, a good balance, and clarity in what we're communicating. So that's the first aspect of what we're trying to achieve. And by balance, we could think about it in two ways. We want the content and the meaning of the lyric to be complementary and aligned with the music. So we want the music to sort of support what we're saying with the lyrics, and we don't want, if one of them is competing for our attention, the overall effect is going to be weaker. And then the sonic characteristics of the words also want to fit. So we don't want there to be too many words for a line, or to feel like we're stumbling over the words, or like the words have got one rhythm and the music has a different rhythm. And this may be really obvious, because if you've listened to a lot of music, when you start coming to do it, up to a point you will have absorbed so much that this is going to be quite instinctive. But it's still worth being really explicit about it when we're focusing on this particular area. So that's going to be things like the stress patterns, how many syllables there are in the words, how long the phrases are. And you can think of the structure of words in a song as having a few different levels. There's the section length, and that could be 2 lines, 4 lines, 6 lines, 8 lines. We've got a certain number of sections in the song, and they might be the same length every time, or some sections may be longer. And then there's going to be the phrases inside of the line. So section length is going to have a certain number of lines. Maybe I've got 4 lines. Each line is going to have a phrase in it, and that there's going to be different phrases that might be different phrase lengths. And then within each phrase, there's going to be a certain distribution of syllables and accents. So those are sort of the zoomed out and zoomed in attributes of the lyric. And that's even before we think about things like rhyme scheme. So the lyrics themselves and the words and the way the words are arranged, even before you get to what those words mean, have a certain structure and a certain architecture. And we want that to feel balanced. So, for example, in the song That's Amore, when the moon hits your eye like a big pizza pie, that's amore. The stress on those lines is on the last syllable each time, and it's the same rhythm. Da 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 da. Apart from the very last line, that's amore, the stress is on the second syllable. And so we got da. It's almost like a little bit of a seesaw. Da 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 da. And the fact that the accent there is on the second last rather than the last syllable is a springboard into the next section. When you've had too much wine and I can't remember the next verse, starts to shine, that's amore. So that's just a little example of what the main structural attributes of the lyric are going to be. And in terms of how we can fit those to the music, I'm going to go into that a little bit now, but I just wanted to give you a bit of an overview. So when it comes to writing music to lyrics, it depends a little bit how you've come up with the lyrics. But let's imagine that you have some lines that are stacked into a draft section of some kind. You're going to choose the most important phrases and lines first. So there's going to be some, just like in a solo, there's going to be some notes that are more important than other notes. Maybe the kind of peak notes, the notes at the end of the phrases. There's going to be a hierarchy of which notes in the phrase are more significant than others. And then there's going to be passing notes, lyric ideas. There's going to be certain themes in a song that are the takeaway themes that you really want the listener to receive, that are more important than some of the other words. And so we want those words to be spotlit. When you are about trying to set words to lyrics, it's helpful if in the first instance you've got quite short phrases, because that's going to give you a lot more flexibility. If you have like long paragraphs, it's going to be very hard to set those. If you can divide those long paragraphs into the shortest possible phrases, you've got a lot more flexibility with how you're going to arrange things. So that's, let's imagine that you've got a nice little notebook and you've got it with a bunch of short phrases, and they don't have to rhyme, but you've at least kind of got somewhere to start. What I would do is decide what the overall mood that you're going for is going to be, and the overall energy level that you want to create. So if it's bright and up tempo, that's going to be a different energy to sort of chilled out but content. It's going to be that the different energy levels there, as well as different emotional registers. So once you've spent a little bit of time thinking about this and write down some actual adjectives to describe it, and they're going to be helpful to you to sort of audit yourself and see whether you're keeping yourself on track. These words are not going to be in your lyrics. They're just helping you set out what it is that you want to accomplish. Once you've done that, that will suggest to you what kind of a tempo you want to go for, whether it's going to be fast or slow. Something that's about being contented, at ease, relaxed is not going to be super high tempo. Something that's very upbeat and, let's have a party is going to be much more up tempo. Something that's angry might also be up tempo. Something that's sad, you can have sad, quick sadness and slow sadness, but you'll be able to decide about that. I think it's getting a little dark here in Spain, so I'm just going to open the curtain. There we are. Now, so we've got our ideas about tempo and mood. Once you've done that, start thinking about the type of chord world your song that matches the mood. So again, if you're writing something that's going to be very bright and up tempo, you're probably not going to have mainly minor chords. If you're writing something very dark and intense, you're probably not going to have mainly major chords. So there's going to be places you can look for the type of chord world that matches the emotion and the energy level you want to create in your song. So that's where to start with the chords. And the tempo is also very important when it comes to arranging the words over the pulse. Okay, so let's say you've done that. I've got my list of brainstorming and phrases, and I've decided on a chord environment. Now I'm going to choose the most important phrases in the lyrics so far. Maybe 2 to 5 of the most significant ones, the ones that I imagine transmitting the message of the chorus, even if they're not the exact words that I might use in the end. I'm going to find the most important phrases and think about the rhythm of the syllables and the word groups in these phrases. When you're using them in the shortest phrases, it still makes sense. I've got an example for you in a minute. So play and sing the rhythm of these phrases one by one in different parts of the bar. So you can start on beat 1. You can start right before the bar, before beat 1. You can start after beat 1. And when you arrange them like this in different places in the bar, different of the words are going to be highlighted. So you want to make sure that the important words in your phrase are receiving the rhythmic backup. You don't necessarily want the most important rhythmic position or the longest notes to be on a really trivial or unimportant word. So you're deciding what it is you want to spotlight. And sometimes just tapping out the rhythm of the phrase without assigning any pitch to it is a really good way to feel that and really good way to focus on that and not be distracted by melody. But if you've already got some notes in mind, you can try that out too. You just might need to adjust the chords. So I'm going to show you what I mean. I've got a couple of example lyric, an example chorus lyric. There's just two phrases. Don't take it so hard. It's not the last chance. So I'm imagining a song where we want to transmit this message that there's optimism. We might have had a difficult time, but we can look ahead with confidence. Maybe it's consoling. I'm going to get a pick. I'm going to show you how we would move that around to different places on the bar. Right, so I'm going to start with beat 1. 1, 2, 3, 4. Should have played myself the chord to get a note first, shouldn't I? Okay, that's it. 1, 2, 3, 4. Don't take it so hard. It's not the last chance. So when I do it like that, the words don't and it's get a lot of emphasis. Don't take it so hard. It's is like not a very significant word. I don't think I want to spotlight that word. It's not worthy of the amount of attention it will get in that position. So let's start in the middle of the bar now. So I've got this is the bar before 3, 4. Don't take it so hard. It's not the last chance. Now I like that better because the last notes are getting the strong beat and they are on the higher note and they're the more important words in the phrase. We want to emphasize the idea like, okay, we've had difficulty, but we have more opportunities to come. So that's working a little bit better in terms of both feeling good and matching the spotlighted words.
That is a super great point. And the picture that I have in my mind is like the Overton window. You know, you're taking the line, the lyrical, the vocal line, and you're just shifting it this way or shifting it that way in order for the most significant words to be lined up with where rhythmically or musically in the measure receive that level of importance or accent or whatever. And I hope that people picked up on it. Looked like some people have in chat that it's the same line shifted earlier, shifted later, so that the elements start to align so that the music makes the lyrics, the specific words or syllable of a word be accented where in the most ideal place. So that's really smart. That makes sense. It's common sense, but honestly, I hadn't thought about it until you said it. So that's great.
Well, I thank you. And I think that there are lots of ways where these ideas can line up with concepts guitarists may already be familiar with. And there are already going to be guitarists that think about when they're writing their solos, what's the most important note in my phrase? Where am I headed? Where do I want to end to have the people really pay attention to my climactic end note of my solo or the most important note of my solo? It's exactly the same kind of thinking. You're just applying it to words. So the last example I was going to do there is what happens when we start just a little bit before the pulse. And I'll do that because that gives us something slightly different. So I'm going to start, because of my note, that my melody note is an F and F is an C, I'm going to chuck in an extra chord so that I don't get melodic dissonance, an unchosen melodic dissonance. I go 2. Don't take it so hard. It's not the last chance. And that feels different again. So I liked the one where we came in and the end note landed on the strong beat. That communicates very clearly. So that's kind of, and it's on the strong accent, it's got the long note and it's the highest pitch note. So that works really well, but this works in a different way because it has a feeling of ongoing movement. The fact it's a little bit syncopated, it sort of propels forward a little bit more. So maybe I'd want something like this in a verse where I wanted us to keep moving, and I'd want a placement like the second placement for a chorus where I'd really want to focus the listener on what we're saying. So on the other hand, I could also make the case that would be cool for a chorus because the meaning of the words is all about there's more to come. So a feeling of movement in the line kind of matches that quite nicely. So that's a very simple thing that you can do. You don't have to you can just do it with a rhythm, and different phrases are going to feel differently. What I did do, don't take it so hard, it's not the last chance. There are 5 syllables in each word. So the phrases themselves are balanced. So I'm just making that point because obviously if you didn't have phrases with the same amount of syllables, it wouldn't work so well. The other thing that those lines have, those example lines, they end on a stressed syllable. So the word rescue, the first syllable is stressed and the last syllable is unstressed. The word river ends on an unstressed syllable, but the words hard and chance, they only have 1 syllable and that syllable is stressed. So that's another consideration. When we end on a stressed syllable, there's more attention and accent on it, especially if it's on a stressed beat. If we Last chance is two, last chance is two, but the word chance is one. So that's another thing to keep in mind. The where you put the stress, whether the word ends on an unstressed, the line ends on an unstressed syllable or a stressed syllable, also makes a difference to how much we feel things are moving forward versus how much we feel they're coming to like a finite point. So those are some ways that I would think about taking lyrics that I already had and starting to write music. Now, there's a lot more we could say in terms of phrase, how many syllables in a phrase, and how we can think about that, and whether we want to contrast in terms of how you can create contrast between different sections. This question of ending on unstressed versus stressed syllables is one of the subtle ways that we can create a feeling of forward movement or create a feeling of like a little pause. And so those are one of the ways that we can vary the sonic characteristics of the words between sections. And one of the things I think is really interesting about this is in genres or styles of music where the chords don't vary all that much. Let's take a 12-bar blues, and I've got a fun thing for you guys to maybe do afterwards relating to a 12-bar that I'll explain shortly. But if you take a 12-bar blues, there are some variations in the chord patterns. We can have, a quick change blues, or we can have different types of blues, but essentially it's a very familiar chord progression. So how come we don't get bored of it? How come all blues don't sound really too much the same? Obviously, there's a degree of melodic variation, but when you start getting into the nitty-gritty of it, exactly what types of phrasing you're using and where the phrases are starting, all of that creates a whole load of kind of invisible to the naked eye, but very powerful contrast that allows us to be really creative and create an enormous amount of variety in an apparently quite harmonically restricted canvas. So I wonder if now would be a good time for me to take a question about how do you know if a syllable is stressed or unstressed? Maybe before we get onto the music. So essentially, if English is your first language, it's going to be a lot easier. You might need to look it up in the dictionary, and there's a little symbol which is like a tick on the stressed syllable, but it's where it's the longer syllable. If you really exaggerated, let's take the word longer. If I exaggerated that word and I went longer, the first syllable has got more weight on it. You also might hear it go up a bit, longer. Rescue. River. So there's a little bit of natural pitch variation, but it's also the place where you emphasize. And also, if you're confused, try it the other way around, and river sounds weird. And the word rescue is a good example because that Blink 182 song that has a chorus that goes rescue, and you notice it because it's fine. It's a great song. It's not a critique, but it's an example of where it sticks out a little bit because the stress is on the wrong syllable. So if you take the word perfect and you say perfect, now that means something different. If you take the word present and then you take the word present, that also means something different. So that's the stressed syllable is the one that is more heavily accented, and there's lots of names they have, but really it's fairly easy to identify with your ear, and if you're not sure, try saying it the other way and it's going to feel wrong. Some words that are longer have a primary stressed syllable and then a secondary slightly stressed but not as stressed as the first one, like extraordinary. The second syllable is the most stressed one, extraordinary, and then wait a minute, fourth one. The fourth one is a bit less stressed, but it still has a secondary stress on it. Now, hopefully that's just a very basic, quick introduction, because it is important to this question of fitting the lyrics to the music, but equally it is a big area known as meter. So, right, that's a little bit on how we would, if we had some lyrics to start with, ways that we could think about both how to contrast the different sections and how to decide on how in practice you can experiment with different rhythmic placements. Common problems can arise when we've just got too many words in the line and we can't find something good because we just need to trim the fat. So, for example, if you said, nobody seems to want to listen, that's loads of lines. But if you say no one listens, I mean loads of words, nobody seems to want to listen, da, 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 it's going to be harder to set than no one listens. I've got the same meaning, but I've just trimmed a bunch of unnecessary syllables. I do have to do this all the time with my writing because I am naturally very talkative and I use loads of words. So I always have to go through things and remove words.
So just to clarify, so are you making a general statement that to try to express yourself in the most concise way is your natural preference, your personal subjective natural preference, or that it simply opens up more doors to do more because you can stretch words out? Or were you saying communicating something else? Second one. Got it.
Second one. So yeah, the more you trim any unnecessary syllables, the more options you've got for how you can move things around in a line. And also you're going to end up therefore really thinking about what it is you want to express, and you're going to be more highly accountable for what it is you're trying to communicate, and generally the result is going to be more persuasive because of that. So the second one, Bob Dylan certainly could pack the syllables in. But yeah, see, that's really interesting because sometimes he's using that in something like Extraterrestrial Blues, that was Subterranean, that one. He uses the constant flow of syllables like an extra rhythm instrument. And when you think of it like that, it's pretty interesting. He's using his voice. And Bob Dylan is somebody who does not know, his biggest fans wouldn't say that he was a highly technical vocalist. But he does have quite an interesting way of working with the rhythm of his lines. And I think that does help him communicate his lyrics, and it helps the overall musical effect, despite, you know, a rudimentary approach to vocal technique, let's say. Not shading Bob. So once the rhythm feels good, you can start thinking about melodic choices. So you might decide which note the phrase is going to end on from the chord. You might choose to use different groups of notes in different parts of the song. So maybe you're going to use draw from a group of sort of 3 or 4 notes in the verse, and then you're going to expand that out and use a different group of notes in the chorus. Pretty common to have the verse melodies be in a slightly lower pitch register and the chorus melodies in a slightly higher pitch register. It can work the other way around too, but just thinking about separating those out gives us a feeling that we're hearing something new in the song, there's something new to enjoy. So those, in terms of starting to think about the note choices, once you've got the rhythm down, those are some of the things you can think about. You might think about melodic contours and having different melodic contours. So a melodic contour is simply going to be the first Noel has a melodic contour that goes up. The first Noel, the angels, and it comes down again. Baby, you're a firework. That kind of comes down and goes up a little bit. So it's just the shape of the direction of in which the notes move if you drew it as a shape. So you can think about what melodic contour you want. You can make sequences, so you can take a little motif and then you can move that up or down in the same pattern through a scale. You can contrast different note lengths. So if you think about the song Dangerous Woman by the Ariana Grande, the chorus of that, the verse of that has exclusively very short notes. And they're all, none of them start on beat 1. They all start on the second 16th note triplet. And then when she gets to the pre-chorus and the chorus, the notes start getting longer and they shift to the strong beat. And this is a great example of a song where we've got the same 4 chords all the way through the song, and the contrast and the feeling of expansion and release is because we've gone from these really short notes that aren't on the strong beats to longer notes that are, and that gives us this a real feeling of a chorusiness feeling of release. So those are the types of things you can think about when you are moving your melodic choices from section to section within the song. Now, melody writing is a big area in its own right. That's just scratching the surface of what you can do. And Tom Hess may very well have some observations on melody writing. But in comparison with musical lines, you always want to make sure the words are being understood. So your melody can be adventurous, but you need to keep in mind the vocal range, whether it's yours or you're writing for somebody else. And the fact that if your melody is going all over the place and it's very, very intervallic and it's very angular, then it might be harder for people to follow the words. So you always prioritizing the communication aspect of it. Question, what principles for choosing, sorry.
Let's get to that question in one moment. One thing I wanted to say to point out is when you have existing lyrics, I think that some people, and I've seen this with students who are, songwriting students, when they have existing lyrics, sometimes when they go to write a melody for those lyrics, they count the number of words, or more likely the number of syllables, and then from that number, that's how many notes or articulations of a note are in the melody. And I think a lot of people do that naturally without thinking a word or even a single syllable could be sustained or sung on more than one note, which is often the case. But sometimes when someone is used to writing, if they've got a line that's 7 syllables long, they'll write a 7-note melody and try to fit, one syllable per melodic note, and thinking that's the way it ought to be done. And certainly it can be done that way. But you could write, a melody that has only 4 notes and 7 syllables, or a line that has 7 syllables and the melody is 11 notes long. You don't have to line up number of syllables with number of actual pitches. The number of pitches can be shorter, less, or more. It may
Definitely
seem obvious now when you hear it, but sometimes when students are first doing it, that's just what they do. Syllables to notes, and they get locked into that, and that's all they do. And then they struggle with the creative aspect, and it feels mechanical.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. Because it's a bit like the first time I was shown a pentatonic and told to improvise. I was like, oh, no, 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 no. And it sounded really bad. So this is why I think it's really helpful to establish a little bit ahead of time, or to at least set yourself the constraint of working with a smaller number of total pitches. So maybe you're just going to give yourself between 3 and 5 pitches in total. You could repeat those. You can use those pitches as many times as you want. But yeah, if you had a line where, like, for example, let's take that Ariana Grande example again. Da 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 da, 2 pitches. Da 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 da, a 3rd pitch. Da 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 da, da 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 da. I don't know if you can recognize it from my amazing rendition, but we get like a minute into the song, we've had like 3 pitches, but we're not bored because there's all this other interesting rhythmic and arrangement stuff happening. So yes, think about the melodic area you want to be in. I think making these decisions ahead of time helps you challenge yourself in a different way than going from one word to the next word to the next word without having thought it through in advance. I'm just going to turn the light on because I feel like I'm receding into the dark. 1 second. So yes, and thinking about, so from that point of view, in terms of the melody choices, think about the amount of contrast and continuity you want, because what we're saying, if another way of me saying, giving you a suggestion to pick a smaller number of melodic choices first and stay within those, is that there are other ones that remain to you for a different part of the song. So essentially it's about making sure you have some means of creating a sense of contrast and variety. So really, there's really interesting research about what happens before we get a perception of enjoyment of music, like what is happening in our brains before we get to the point where experiencing music as generating an impulse or a response in us. And what they think is that something that we perceive at our conscious level as an emotional response to music is massively to do with the creation and interruption of patterns. So when you take a restricted number of notes, it's much easier to create those patterns that the audience is going to be able to rapidly assimilate and that's satisfying for them. And I think it's really easy to worry about being too repetitive, but you will know if something's happening too much and you're bored of hearing it. For your audience who's hearing something for the first time, it's much less likely to be repetitive than you think it is, and it's going to help them if they're trying to decode what is happening in the music and in the musical movements, and they're trying to hear what the words are. They are not going to receive as much of your song. So if you make it easy for them to follow, and this doesn't have to mean simplistic dumbed down melodies or anything like this, but it just means, again, this idea of clarity, then it's going to be easier for them to receive the more of the meaning of your composition. So that is a little bit on writing the music when you already have some lyric ideas. And actually, the last thing that I was going to say about this is be prepared to kill your lyrical babies. So let's say you've got your lines written and let's say I really wanted to use the line, "Don't take it so hard," but it just wasn't really fitting. Just find a different way to express that. Use online thesaurus. There's lots and lots of different ways. If I put, let's say the line needed to have, the word at the end of the line needed to have 2 syllables to feel good over the music that I'd chosen. I could just put the word hard into a thesaurus, and it would probably come up with a different word that I could use that would have 2 syllables. Don't take it so badly. So, I mean, retain the core of the idea that you want to communicate. Don't get too attached to any one particular phrase. Sometimes something you may get further with a different way of expressing your initial idea. Any phrases that you really like, you can still keep them and you might use them in something else. So that was the last bit that I wanted to make sure I said in the lyrics part, that even if you start from the point of view of particular phrases that you've written, be willing to modify them if something better comes along or a better way of fitting it to some music comes along. So,
Deanna, did you want to, earlier, I think you wanted to take a question. Was that Dwight's question?
Let's see. Well, we talked about the question, what are the principles for choosing lyrics in the bridge and chorus in terms of duration of line? Yes, great question. So I would say that there aren't, the main principle is that the bridge is supposed to be a contrast to the rest of the song. And the things that you can contrast are the content. Let's say that the verse has spoken a lot about the present and the chorus has expressed some hopes for the future. I could create contrast in the bridge by discussing the past. Or let's say that the verse has talked about you and the chorus has talked about me. The bridge might talk about something completely different, a different person, or just not the you or the me. So you can create contrast in the bridge by different content, different sort of meaning. Contrast in the musical and sonic attributes of the language by a slightly different melody, by having a different rhyme scheme. You could end, for example, with a stressed syllable, or I think with an unstressed syllable if you had stressed syllables in the other section. You could distribute the phrases differently. Maybe the section length is going to be different. Maybe it's going to be a 2-bar turnaround instead of a 4-bar turnaround. Maybe the line's going to be an 8-bar line. So you can, those are all things that you could choose to contrast in a bridge section. When it comes to a chorus, you can find examples of songs that are going to do things differently than what I'm saying. You could do, in a way, the caveat here is like, you can do what you want. But having said that, the chorus is typically the place where you're going to transmit the most fundamental thing that your song is about. So in a way, there is nothing new under the sun. So if you're trying to find something new, it's almost like a besides the point. It's a red herring. What your song is doing is shining a flashlight on an aspect of human experience. So it's like you're focusing us on some aspect of what it is to be human. You don't have to invent that from scratch. That's not where the value of the song lies. So the chorus is really where you are deciding what it is you want to focus us on most strongly. If someone's going to repeat back to you in one sentence what they felt the song was about, that's what the chorus is. So hopefully that gives some ways of thinking about contrast and content in bridge and chorus sections. So I've got some stuff on writing the lyrics to the music next. Now, let's say I've got a melody or I've got a chord progression. Now, those of you that are guitarists or primarily guitarists and keyboard players, perhaps, you probably have had lots of experiences where you were playing something, maybe you were learning a new scale, maybe you were learning a new set of chords, and then you came up with a little melody that you liked, or you came up with a sequence of chords that you enjoyed, and like, oh, this is cool. And maybe you recorded it on your phone in your songwriting notes or composition notes bit. And then you're like, I'd kind of like to do something with that. So these are the kinds of things you can do if that has ever happened to you. So normally there'll be some kind of mood that the riff or chord progression or melody you've written suggests to you. It's going to be in an emotional arena. One of the challenges of writing lyrics to music is that you're having to define things in a lot more detail. Music can have an overall mood and can live in that mood quite happily, but a lyric has got to now bring a lot of detail to that. So melody or a chord progression can be sad, or it can be reflective, or it can have a tense feeling to it, and that can work on its own sort of standalone quite effectively. But now if you're going to add words, those words have to be expressed in detail, more define what that is, and so that takes more effort. So if you tried this and it's felt difficult, it's because it does require effort. So that's fine. We don't. But if you're going to have some kind of overall mood that the music suggests to you. So what I would do is record it, listen back on a loop, note down anything that comes into your mind when you're listening to it. Any images, any responses, any associations, any memories, any mental pictures. What is your response to hearing it? It's important that when you do this, you record it first and listen back, because if you are playing it and trying to think at the same time, you've got much less mental bandwidth available. And it's unlikely you're going to think of as many things. And you're also going to get tired. And you might need to listen to it for sort of 4 minutes or 5 minutes and really get into the zone of it. So does it suggest a transition to you? What would be the next mood along from it, or the mood before? So what else can be grouped along with it, or along with any images that come up? And so from the brainstorming that you do in this way, see if something stands out as a core idea that really feels like it has some juice for you and some energy for you, and that it matches. Does it, other dynamics? Is there going to be does the music suggest a build at any point, or does it have a high point? Is it going to be like inhabiting one mood for a certain duration of time, or is it something that builds and is going to go to something else? So think about all of those things, but when I say think, I mean allow yourself to experience a response, which is slightly different from trying to intellectualize it. So once you've done all of this, and you might need to do it a couple of times, you're probably going to have some words, images, ideas written down. And when you establish what you think the core idea is, find as many different ways of expressing that as you can. Generate another half page of jottings. Then think about what section length the music you have so far suggests to you. So what you've written might suggest a section length of 4 bars, 8 bars, 2 bars. If you've written a riff, sometimes that riff might be in an odd time signature. So I think, I don't think Pink Floyd started out with a definite brief that they were going to write a 7/4 riff for Money. Bong, dung, da, dung, 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 dung. It just, that riff works because it feels, they wrote it and they're like, okay, so this is in 7/4. So decide what the section length that most naturally matches what you've created musically so far is going to be. And then that might dictate how you're going to contrast with other sections of the song. So let's say you've got something that you think would be an absolutely killer 4-bar turnaround for a chorus. It's really punchy. It's got loads of energy. You can hear it 4 times round and really enjoy hearing it. then that might suggest to you that either your verses will also be 4 bars, or you might want to contrast and have them work in 8-bar sections or in a 16-bar section or a 2-bar, 2-bar, 4-bar. So once you've got some section lengths lined up, decide if it depends whether you've got a melody here or whether you've got a chord sequence. If you've got a melody, work out how many notes it's got. There's a little bit of wiggle room for how many syllables with a melody, because you could sing one syllable on a long note, or you could make that long note divide it into 2 and sing 2 syllables, and it would still basically be the same melody. So there's a little bit of wiggle room, but you will probably want to write some kind of placeholder stress pattern that works well. So for a long time, the song Yesterday was called Scrambled Eggs by Paul McCartney, because he just had that as a placeholder word for that da 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 that he'd written the melody first. So maybe take a couple of variations of such a thing, a stress holder pattern, and then start trying out different phrases from your earlier brainstorm. Pull out different ideas that you've already written until you find something that you think fits. If you've got a rhythmic pattern already in mind, that will help you not just be random. It'll give you something to aim towards. And once you've got a definite thing you're trying to do, it's much easier to generate a lot of possibilities than if you're stabbing in the dark. So you can take a specific kind of stress pattern or meter pattern. One example is common meter, because that's 4 stresses per line. You could, if you've got chords written but you don't have a melody, you can make those kinds of rhythmic decisions first. And the thing that I've got for you guys to have a go at directly after the session to put some of this into practice is take some blues. And I've got a backing track that I can link you to in the chat. But I just found it on YouTube, so you could also find your own if you want. And with a blues, one of the decisions you're going to make if you've got chords but no melody, and you've got a certain section length, is how many phrases you're going to put over each set of 4 bars, or each set of 2 bars, or each set of 8 bars. Because you don't want a really long line that starts in a really long sentence and carries on and on like this, because it's really hard for people to follow the rhythm of what's happening, and it becomes incomprehensible. So you want to divide. Let's say you've got a block of music that's chords, and you want to write words over the top, you're going to decide where the phrases are going to go. But an easy way to get started with this, because you've heard this type of music a lot in your life, and to an extent you're probably going to do it quite instinctively, is over a 12-bar blues. So if you think about, I've got a couple of examples I could play or that I can link, but essentially in each line of 4 bars in a 12-bar, we've got 16 beats. So the brief is that over each line of 16 beats, we're going to write a couple of phrases. And we're going to write one phrase that starts somewhere in bar 1 and ends somewhere in bar 2. And then we are going to start another little short phrase that starts somewhere in bar 2 and ends roughly around beat 9. So by the time we get to the 3rd bar, we're wrapping up our 2 phrases, and the rest of those bars are free for the audience to kind of receive what we've just said for a cool guitar fill or something like this. Then we're going to do the same thing in the next 4 bars. And then we are going to have a different line, but according to the same distribution on the same beats for the last line. So I've written quite an appropriate one. And I'm just going to give you an example of what I mean. It's just you don't have to, if you do this at home afterwards, don't agonize about writing like a great meaningful thing. I've just done a little lyric about bad internet. So I'm going to stop round about beat 9 of the first line. So but I'm going to repeat my line. So it's going to be, can't get connected, signals awful weak. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Next line. Can't get connected, the signal's awful weak. Sorry about the bad singing there. Apparently I've forgotten how to play a 12-bar. Well, I'll tie a piece of string to that tree outside and speak. So that's just a little example. You've heard tons and tons of blues that did the same thing. You know, if you think about Down to the Crossroads, I went down to the crossroads. That's one phrase. Down on my knees. That's another phrase. Then he repeats that. And lots of there is examples of blues where the more of the line is filled, but there are lots and lots of examples that work this way. So that's because you've heard so much of this, you it's probably going to feel quite natural to you, but it's going to be, you're now going to do it with like that deliberate consciousness that that is actually what you're doing. You're arranging, and you might be starting halfway through the bar, you might be starting right on the bar, you might be starting before the last bar is end, so on a little pickup. So Hound Dog by Elvis Presley is a good example of a song that uses a pickup. You know, you got, you ain't nothing but a hound dog, lying all the time. You ain't nothing but a hound dog. So he's keeping that rolling around by coming in just before the end of the last time. And that helps that feel really kind of like upbeat and up tempo, rather than a slow, reflective kind of melancholy blues. So I've got a couple of links that I can give you to write to this that I will post in the chat at the end. But have a go at that as a way to start putting these things into practice. So you got nine beats that you need to account for, and you're going to use 2 little phrases, and you're going to place those somewhere starting in the first bar, finishing in the second bar. You're going to start somewhere in the rest of the second bar, finishing at the start of the third bar. Depending whether you're on the beat, in between the beats, syncopated, coming in before, that's going to give it different levels of propulsion. I just want to make sure. Would I?
I think Deanna, you have to send me the links.
I have to send you
in
the link.
private chat.
Okay.
Is
Sure.
our system won't let I think only the host can post links.
So
you send them to me, then I'll put them in the chat for them.
Here we go. It's going to let me post in the chat.
You should be able to post them in the private chat.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, so one of those links is just a minor blues that's about 105 BPM. And the other one is an example of a blues called Cruel Hearted Woman. And if you count it out, you can hear really clearly that each phrase is ending, each pair of phrases ends on beat 9. So I think you'll find this really straightforward to do. And now you know why it feels so good and why it feels like it works. And it's a nice, easy way to start trying out the moving around these different rhythmic placements. So let me see if there's any more questions.
As you're scanning for questions, there was one thing I wanted to comment on, or maybe you can comment on either one, but it's this one here. It's from earlier today. I always construct vocal lines based on feel. A lot of this is created naturally, but it's nice to hear her break it down. I'll walk away being more conscious of it now. So the comment made here is a good one. It's a good comment. It's a good observation, but I think that there's much more to take away from everything that Deanna was talking about today, other than it's good to know or have names or titles or a concept for the thing I was already doing naturally. It is good to know what it is that you were doing, and whether it's, guitar playing or music theory or writing lyrics or whatever, but there's so much more depth that we can go into than just being able to attach an idea or a concept or a term or a label to the things we're doing naturally. So, and Deanna, if you want to talk about this as it relates to lyric writing, if you have anything to add to that, feel free. But what I want to talk about for a moment is simply music theory or guitar playing. If I have a lot of students that when they first come to me, they don't know a lot about music theory. Some don't know anything about music theory when they first begin, and they just play by ear, play by feel, etc. And for the most part, they tend to be kind of happy with that. And then when they learn a little bit about music theory, they discover, oh, this is what this thing is called that I've been doing for 30 years. It's called this. So it's good to know that now. Yes, it's good to know that. But now that you know a little bit more, we can take what you already do naturally And because you have more information, you have more concepts that you intellectually understand. Now we can make, and very quickly, many, many different variations. And you might discover that some of those variations you like better than what you naturally did on your own before you knew this stuff. So I think that maybe as it relates to lyric writing, some of the things that Deanna was sharing gives you a sense of, oh, I was doing this and this is what this is called and this is how this works. Yes. But now you can take this and do, perhaps enhance what you were doing further, make further variations. Just wanted to throw that out there if you wanted to add to that at all, Deanna.
Yeah, so I think this is super interesting because if you think about how most of us are exposed to songwriting, so typically what do we discover, or what can we infer about songwriting from the exposure that we get to it as music fans, which is how most of us start. Like, most of us do not have like songwriting lessons at school. Most of us are exposed to the idea of what songwriting is because we are music fans. And so there's going to be artists whose songwriting we enjoy and engage with. And then maybe we're going to like read their interviews and listen to their music, and we're going to go and see them in concert. And we are going to sort of develop an idea about what songwriting is as a result of being exposed to this. But that tells us nothing about songwriting. It tells us about those people's songs. And the thing that, when you think about it, it's like really mind blowing is not only does it not tell you about songwriting, it's actually in the interest of those artists and labels to give you the wrong idea about songwriting. No one's doing this deliberately. It's not like there's a global conspiracy to give you the wrong idea about songwriting. But let's imagine I'm an artist and I've been signed by a label and they want to sell tickets to my shows and they want to get people excited, queuing up to buy tickets to my shows. One of the ways they're going to do that is by convincing everybody that I have a unique and special talent, and that somehow the songwriting fairy like sprinkled some song dust on my head when I was living somewhere, and or maybe I sold my soul to the devil or whatever it was, and so now I have songs, and you can get you can sort of have some of that song magic by coming to my show and listening to my music. So it's in the interest, and if you think about it, most of the material that you consume about your favorite artists, even if it doesn't explicitly say this, it works into that kind of a narrative, because that's how we get people excited to participate and come and share in this unique opportunity to be in the same room as their favorite artists. And I'm a huge music fan, and I've got hugely excited about going to be in the same room as some of my favorite artists. And so from when you come to love songwriting and want to try it, the desire to write songs is the desire to participate in all of that enthusiasm that you already have at a deeper level. But if you think that songwriting, if you read when those artists do interviews, sorry, getting a bit incoherent because of how much I believe this. When you hear them talk about their process, it sounds magical, mysterious, like a struggle. It sounds like something which cannot be codified and it cannot be understood in a normal way. And that's actually not true. Just because we don't know that a whole set of principles exists and that there's all kinds of ways that we can participate as equals in the terrain of creativity, we don't know that, but that doesn't mean that that's not how it is, because that is how it is. So when it comes to writing things instinctively, a lot of people who've listened to a lot of music do have very well developed instincts, and you can definitely write stuff that you love that way, and you should keep that. Like, you are the best judge of what you like. But as Tom Hess said, the more ways you've got to create different possibilities, the higher quality your ultimate decisions are going to be. And I think there are lots of people who I've met over the course of my teaching life who are like, oh, I'm not at all creative. And what they mean is, nothing magical comes into my head when I'm sitting out, looking out the window. But that's not what creativity is, in my opinion. Creativity has got much more to do with making decisions. So every time you make decisions about things, there's creativity involved in that, because you're deciding how things are going to go, what comes first, what comes next. And the higher level, the higher quality decisions you can make, the richer the creative result is going to be. Now, if your decision is between this chord or that chord, that's going to be, level one creative result. I know that I'm making that decision. But now if you've also made decisions about where the line's going to come in the bar, what note's going to line up with the important word, what it is really you want people to understand, how you're going to contrast this pitch range here with that pitch range there, whether you're going to only choose to end on the root note from the chord at the very end, whether you want to, now you've got the creative fruit of like a whole lot more decisions. And it's, I just don't, you're going to get a better result that way. It's just impossible to me that you're not going to get a better result that way. So that doesn't mean that you can't write a good song without knowing a whole bunch of technique. You can, and people have. It's just not very likely that you're going to continue writing tons of songs that you were really pleased with if you don't have anything more to go on than trial and error. So that's how technique supports instinct. Sorry, it was a bit of a rant.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Yeah. And you're right that creativity is not magical. It's primarily not driven by inspiration and the way that people think about it. It's a set of decisions, it's a set of options. It's seeing what doors can be opened, closing the ones you don't want to remain opened, and then eventually you close all the doors until there's just one path from door to, I think about it as a bunch of doors. Okay, or everything before you start writing anything, every door is open. And now we start making decisions. As you make a decision, 1,000 doors close. You make the next decision, 500 more doors closed. You make the next decision, 100 more doors. And eventually, you've just got to pass through one set of doors that leads to the final outcome. I think about it that way. But really, when you start, it's just a whole bunch of doors open. And the decision-making, problem-solving is just a big part of it. And going back to what you said about, sort of this mystique or illusion, whether it's on purpose or not, that musicians and people in the music industry like to state explicitly, or they like to let people assume that they're special in some way, and they don't really want to come down to their fans and everyone else and say, well, really, what I'm really doing here is just this and this and this and this that really anybody can do. But I just did it before you, and that's why you're my fan instead of me being yours or whatever. That's why you're coming up. That's why my poster's on your wall and not your poster on my wall. It's kind of a little bit like that, where, and I was this way too as a fan, as a kid growing up. I just thought these musicians that I admired were just different, special, weird in a positive way, until you learn more and more and more, and you realize, oh, they're just doing a set of things, set of principles, using a set of ideas, putting them together. And not trying to take anything away from things that people have accomplished musically or lyrically, but it gets demystified. It's like when you're a little kid and you see a magic show and your mind is completely blown away. And then if you start learning a little bit about how magic tricks are done, or you become a magician itself, you can still admire the skill or the ideas in which those magic things happen, but it's not magic, and you know it because you now know how it's done, and then you can do it yourself, and that's pretty cool. So great stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you were saying that, I was thinking back to music I loved at university, and at that time I played a little bit of guitar, but I didn't know anything about theory, and I had no concept of how people knew which notes would not clash with a chord. Like, how did they know which notes to choose? That was completely how that seemed like magic. And now that's a very ordinary piece of information that I'm sure a lot of people on this call possess that information. But if you don't have that information yet, because you don't know it's a thing that exists, that you don't, then it seems like magic. So, but it isn't magic.
Right. Yeah. And you can learn it. You learned it. I learned it. Anyone here can learn this stuff. So yeah, it's great stuff. Deanna, you have something that they can check out is beyond the links, download perhaps?
Yes. So I have for anyone who wants to develop a regular writing practice, when I was talking before about how you might have had the experience of playing around on your instrument, coming out with a chord progression or a riff, a lot of those ideas come because we are in the process of playing. But although we speak with language every day, we don't necessarily think about language in the ways that are specific to songs. So practicing your lyrical creativity separately from like, okay, now I'm going to sit down and write the first line of my song, is definitely the way that you're going to get much more satisfactory results with your songwriting. And this is not something I knew when I first wrote songs. I very much thought, okay, well, I guess if I need to write the first line of the first verse, and started that way. But eventually I learned more about how to get a bit deeper and how to be more consistent. And so this is just has a whole bunch of ways you can think about your lyric writing and how you can start developing your own creative practice that will allow you to be much more in control of how you feel your lyrics express your ideas. Hopefully it'll be fun too.
Very cool. Very cool. All right. I also have something that you ladies and gentlemen can download. It is totally free, just as Deanna's resource is. And it's about how to get more gigs and earn a lot more money playing live. Not all of you are doing this yet, but you may in the future want to do this. And basically, I'm going to give you in this, it's a free e-guide. You can download it for free right now. I'm going to give you the top 3 reasons why musicians struggle to get gigs in the first place and how to make yourself immune to those problems so you don't have them. Okay. I'm going to tell you what venues and booking agents and music fans really want from you, and it may not be what you think it is. And I'm going to show you how to give it to them. Then I'm going to give you 8 killer ideas that get more people to come to your live shows. Okay. And help you make more money and make you loved by the club owners and the booking agents. There are certain things you can do. They're not necessarily obvious that you can do to get more people to come there. So, and have a lot more fun and make some more money and get more gigs. So you can download this right now. It's totally free, no strings attached. You can have it in 10 seconds. All right. Very good. All right. Thank you, Deanna. I wanted to thank you for your time here today. We had a lot of good participation from people following along, writing in the chat, asking some questions, a lot of great comments. So it looks like a lot of people liked it. There was a lot of good value there that they received from the things that you shared. So thank you for that. And thank you for your insights and your expertise. I learned a few things that I didn't know before. And that's awesome for me. I love that. So thank you, Deanna.
Well, thank you very much for having me. It's always a treat to discuss this stuff with you and the people who are present. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. All right. Take care, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. We'll see you next time. Thank you, Deanna. Thank you all who attended live and who will check out this recording later. Take care, everybody.